chilling case, the murder of Janice Crowley. We'll uncover how Lindsey Hill, driven by a drug-fueled jealousy over Connor, became the brutal killer and the meticulous cover-up that followed. Our central question today is, how did the intricate web of jealousy, deception, and a meticulous cover-up ultimately unravel, exposing the truth behind Janice Crowley's murder? Throughout our show, we'll follow a clear structure: an introduction, opening remarks from our debaters, a deep dive discussion, rebuttals, and finally our conclusions. Joining us to explore this complex case are two insightful minds. First, we have Eleanor, a behavioral psychologist specializing in the psychology of obsession and interpersonal violence. Eleanor will argue how the corrosive nature of unchecked jealousy can escalate to such tragic ends. And next, we have Lila, a former investigative journalist with extensive experience in cold cases and forensic analysis. Lila will focus on the challenges of uncovering truth amidst shifting stories and the meticulous details that ultimately brought justice. This isn't just a true crime story, it's a crucial lesson. For students and young learners especially, understanding the destructive power of obsession and jealousy and the importance of critical thinking in analyzing complex situations is vital. It helps us recognize warning signs and appreciate the painstaking work in seeking justice. Now, to kick off our discussion, let's turn to Eleanor for her opening remarks. Eleanor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maggie. When we talk about the unraveling of a deadly obsession, we're really looking at the psychological journey of Lindsey Hill. Her deep, almost pathological obsession with Connor, coupled with substance abuse, created a volatile environment. This wasn't just a casual relationship. It was a consuming fixation that ultimately led her to participate in and, as we later learned, commit a horrific act.
And from an investigative standpoint, Eleanor, that obsession was key to understanding the initial cover-up. Lindsey was so entangled with Connor that she fled with him to Mexico, actively trying to evade justice. The challenge for investigators was peeling back those layers of deception, especially when the initial narrative pointed elsewhere.
That's a crucial point, Layla. So let's start there. How did Lindsey's initial involvement in the cover-up, including fleeing to Mexico with Connor, set the stage for the later unraveling of the truth?
Well, Maggie, her flight wasn't just an act of loyalty, it was an extension of her obsession. She was so desperate to maintain her connection to Connor, even if it meant becoming complicit in a murder. This kind of extreme attachment often blinds individuals to the moral implications of their actions, making them willing to go to extraordinary lengths to protect the object of their obsession.
Exactly. And from a practical perspective, their flight complicated the initial investigation significantly. Apprehending them in Mexico and bringing them back to the U.S. was the first hurdle, but even then, Lindsey's story downplayed her role, presenting herself more as an accomplice than the primary aggressor. This shifting narrative was a major obstacle.
So, we have this initial cover-up fueled by obsession and a desire to escape, but at some point that facade began to crack. What was the turning point that started to shift the focus from Connor Pittman to Lindsey Hill as the actual murderer?
The turning point, I believe, was the emergence of new evidence that pointed directly to Lindsey's jealousy. It wasn't just about protecting Connor anymore. It was about her intense, drug-fueled rage over his perceived interest in Janice. This shift in motive from complicity to primary aggression is a critical psychological distinction.
And that new evidence, Eleanor, included Lindsey's own confessions to inmates. When she was incarcerated, she started to reveal details about her role in the murder that directly contradicted her earlier statements. These weren't just casual remarks. They were specific admissions that painted a very different picture of what happened that night.
Those confessions are incredibly telling. Often, in cases of extreme guilt or psychological pressure, individuals will eventually break, even if it's to people they perceive as safe or non-judgmental, like fellow inmates. It's a form of psychological release, and it was crucial in exposing the truth of her involvement.
So, Lindsey's own words, spoken in a moment of vulnerability, became a key piece of the puzzle. And this is where Detective Ginny O'Malley re-enters the picture, isn't it? How did her re-examination of the case, especially with her personal history, contribute to this unraveling?
Ginny O'Malley's involvement was pivotal. Her childhood acquaintance with Connor, who had been a bully, gave her a unique perspective. It wasn't just a cold case, it was personal. This personal connection, combined with her investigative skills, allowed her to look at the evidence with fresh eyes and a deeper understanding of the dynamics at play, including the systemic failures that had allowed Connor's destructive behavior to go unchecked for so long.
And those systemic failures are so important, Lila. Connor's family wealth and status had for years shielded him from the consequences of his actions. This created an environment where someone like Lindsey, already vulnerable and obsessive, could be drawn into his orbit, and where a crime could initially be misattributed. Ginny's reinvestigation helped expose not just the killer, but also the broader context that enabled the tragedy.
Absolutely. Ginny's meticulous re-examination, coupled with Lindsey's confessions and the re-evaluation of forensic evidence, allowed the pieces to finally fall into place. It showed that even with initial missteps and a determined cover-up, persistent investigation and a willingness to challenge existing narratives can ultimately bring justice.
It's a powerful testament to the investigative process. As we wrap up this segment, what are the most critical lessons we can take from the unraveling of this deadly obsession, particularly for our student listeners?
For students, the key lesson is the destructive power of unchecked jealousy and obsession. It can warp perception, lead to horrific acts, and ultimately destroy lives. Recognizing these warning signs both in oneself and in others is incredibly important for mental and emotional well-being.
And from an investigative and societal perspective, it underscores the importance of speaking up. Whether it's against bullying or when you have information about a crime, your voice matters. Ginny O'Malley's journey shows that one person's determination can turn past trauma into purpose and bring closure even years later.
Thank you both for such an insightful discussion. Eleanor, Lila, your perspectives have truly illuminated the complexities of this case. As we draw to a close, Eleanor, could you offer your final thoughts and a key takeaway for our listeners?
Absolutely, Maggie. My core argument throughout this debate has been about the profound and destructive power of unchecked jealousy and obsession. Lindsey Hill's story is a stark reminder of how these intense emotions, especially when fueled by substance abuse, can completely warp an individual's perception of reality and lead to unimaginable violence. It's a psychological journey where a desperate need for connection turns into a consuming fixation, blinding someone to the moral implications of their actions. For our student listeners, understanding these internal mechanisms is crucial for recognizing warning signs, both in themselves and in others, to foster healthier relationships and mental well-being. I'd like to leave you with this question. How can we, as individuals and a society, better identify and address the early signs of destructive obsession before they escalate to tragic outcomes?
That's a powerful question, Eleanor. Lila, what are your concluding thoughts and a final message for our audience?
Thanks, Maggie. From an investigative standpoint, this case really highlights the immense challenges of uncovering truth amidst layers of deception and shifting narratives. Lindsey's initial cover-up and flight to Mexico, coupled with Connor's influence, created a significant hurdle for justice. But it also underscores the critical importance of persuasion and the courage to challenge initial assumptions. Ginny O'Malley's re-examination, combined with Lindsey's own confessions, ultimately peeled back those layers, showing that truth can prevail even against systemic failures and privilege. My message is about the power of speaking up and the relentless pursuit of justice. Every piece of information, every re-evaluation matters. So I ask you all, considering the initial misdirection in this case, what steps can we take to ensure that all voices are heard and that justice isn't swayed by external factors like wealth or social standing?
Both incredibly thought-provoking questions. Eleanor, you've emphasized the internal psychological drivers of obsession and jealousy and their devastating consequences. Lila, you highlighted the external challenges of investigation, the importance of perseverance, and the societal factors that can impede justice. What's clear is the destructive nature of unchecked emotions and the vital role of a robust justice system. For our students, I hope this discussion encourages you to think critically about human behavior, the complexities of the legal process, and your own role in fostering a more just and empathetic society. Thank you, Eleanor.